All right, so are you ready to dive into the goal? This book, it's not just about factories. It's like a
Yeah.
total mind shift
Yeah.
on how to approach like any problem you've got.
Right.
And it follows this plant manager, Alex Rogo, who's in a real pickle.
Oh, yeah.
His factory's failing, and he's got like 3 months
Oh, wow.
to turn things around or it's curtains.
Yeah, the brilliance of this book, I think, is how it really, takes you on this journey with Alex using this super engaging story
Yeah.
and these almost like Socratic dialogues
Mm.
to uncover these really profound insights about efficiency.
Hmm.
It's almost like a detective novel for operations management.
It totally is.
Works down.
And what's even cooler is that these principles about bottlenecks, constraints, and systems thinking, they don't just apply to factories.
Right.
You can use them to improve your workflow, manage projects, even tackle your personal goals.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about it. You've probably got some herbies slowing you down in your own life, right?
We all do.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this deep dive gets really interesting.
Okay.
We're going to extract those universal nuggets of wisdom from the goal.
Yeah.
So you can start applying them right away.
Okay. So let's jump right into one of the most iconic parts of the book,
Okay.
the Boy Scout hike.
All right.
Now, when I first read this, I was like, hold on. What does hiking have to do with running a factory? But stick with me.
Yeah.
Because this analogy is pure gold.
Yeah.
So picture this. Alex is leading his son's Boy Scout troop on this overnight hike.
Mm-hmm.
And he notices that they keep spreading out on the trail.
Okay.
Even when everyone's trying to walk at the same pace.
Yeah.
The line just stretches out. Sound familiar?
Absolutely. We've all experienced this, whether it's on a hike,
Yeah.
in the traffic jam,
Yeah.
or even just waiting in line at the grocery store.
Yeah.
And this is where Goldratt introduces these two really important concepts:
Okay.
dependent events and statistical fluctuations.
Okay, break those down for me. They sound a little
Yeah.
technical.
So think of it like making breakfast.
Okay.
You want to toast some bread, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do that until the toaster's plugged in.
Right.
That's a dependent event.
Okay.
One thing relies on another to happen.
Okay.
And even if you aim for a perfectly cooked sunny-side-up egg every time,
Right.
sometimes it's a little overcooked, sometimes it's runny.
Yeah.
That's statistical fluctuation.
Okay.
Little variations that happen naturally.
Got it.
Right.
So in the hike, each scout's progress depends on the scout in front of them,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone naturally speeds up and slows down a bit,
Right.
even though they're trying to keep a consistent pace.
Precisely.
Okay.
And what Alex realizes is that the entire troop's speed
Mm-hmm.
is determined by the slowest hiker,
Oh.
a kid named Herbie.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if some scouts are super speedy.
Right.
Herbie's pace dictates the pace for everyone.
It's like that saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Exactly.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
So how does this hiking scenario connect back to the factory?
Well, this is where I think the real light bulb moment happens for Alex.
Okay.
He realizes that Herbie represents the bottleneck in his factory, the constraint that's slowing down the entire production process.
Okay.
And just like on the hike, it doesn't matter if other parts of the system are faster.
Right.
That one bottleneck determines the overall output.
So finding your Herbie is the first step, but what do you do once you found it?
Yeah,
Do you just try to make Herbie walk faster?
not quite.
Okay.
Goldratt argues that it's not about making everything faster.
Mm-hmm.
It's about strategically managing that constraint.
Okay.
First, you have to exploit it,
Okay.
meaning make sure it's operating at maximum efficiency.
Okay.
Get rid of any obstacles or inefficiencies that are slowing it down.
So it's about optimizing that one critical point.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the next step is subordination,
Okay.
which means making sure that everything else in the system
Mm-hmm.
supports the needs of the bottleneck.
Mm.
Think of it as a team effort where everyone's working together to help Herbie keep up.
Okay, starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to fix everything at once,
Right.
you focus your energy on that one constraint that's having the biggest impact.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this might mean changing schedules, reprioritizing tasks, or even reallocating resources.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about making sure that bottleneck is running smoothly
Yeah.
and nothing's getting in its way.
And the book gives some really cool examples of how Alex does this in his factory, right?
Was.
Like rearranging worker schedules,
Yeah.
putting quality control before the bottleneck, even changing the entire factory's priority system
Right.
to focus on orders that are holding up the flow.
Yes. It's all about aligning the entire system around that crucial point.
Okay.
Now, this might sound pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
But in reality, it can be a huge challenge.
Why is that?
Well,
It seems like a no-brainer once you understand the concept.
think about it in a traditional business mindset.
Oh.
You're often focused on cutting costs across the board or trying to optimize every single department.
Yeah.
But Goldratt argues that this can actually hurt your overall throughput,
Okay.
which is basically how much your system produces in a given time.
So it's like trying to make the whole pipeline wider.
Right.
When you really just need to focus on clearing the blockage at one specific point.
Exactly.
Got it.
And this goes against a lot of conventional thinking. So Alex faces a ton of resistance when he tries to implement these ideas.
I bet.
His team is skeptical, his superiors are stuck in their old ways, and even the corporate culture itself is working against him.
Yeah, I bet that's super frustrating.
It is.
It's like he's trying to change the direction of a giant ship, and everyone's used to sailing the old course.
It is, but this is also where I think the book gets really relatable.
Okay.
Because haven't we all experienced that kind of resistance when we've tried to make changes?
Totally.
Whether at work, in a project, or even in our own lives?
Totally. It's like trying to convince your family to try a new restaurant.
Right.
When they're all obsessed with their usual spot.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. This book isn't just about factories.
Right.
It's about systems thinking.
And that's what makes it so powerful.
Yeah.
Once you start to see the world through this lens, you start to spot Irbies everywhere.
Okay.
That slow computer that's bottlenecking your workflow, that's a Herbie. That one task you keep putting off, that's holding up an entire project. That's a Herbie. Even that bad habit that's preventing you from achieving a personal goal.
Yeah.
You guessed it, another Herbie.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. So instead of getting frustrated with those things, I can actually start to see them as opportunities to improve the whole system.
Absolutely. And that's where I think the goal gives us this amazing framework for not just identifying our constraints, but also for systematically breaking through them and achieving our goals.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. I'm starting to see Irbies everywhere now. But before we get too carried away, let's pause here for a moment and let those ideas sink in. What's standing out to you so far? What are you already starting to apply to your own life?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So for me.
So we've got the basics of bottlenecks down, and it seems like finding those Irbies is the key to unlocking major improvements. But I'm curious, is it a one-time fix, or do these constraints keep shifting?
Oh, that's where things get even more interesting. The goal isn't just about quick fixes. It's about embracing this mindset of ongoing improvement. Think of it like a garden. You're always tending to it, pruning, weeding, adapting to the changing seasons. You're never really done, right?
Right. I can see that, and the book really drives this home. When Alex faces a whole new set of challenges after those initial wins at his factory, it's like he conquers one mountain, and then bam, there's another one right in front of him.
Exactly, and it's a fantastic parallel, I think, to what happens in real life. We solve one problem, and then a new one pops up, or the market shifts, or our priorities change. It's this constant dance of adaptation and refinement.
Yeah, so how did Alex handle that? Did he just go back to those same principles, or did he have to come up with a whole new strategy?
Well, that's where I think the idea of the 5 focusing steps comes in. Remember how excited Bob Donovan was about that process?
Yeah.
Turns out it wasn't just a one-off solution for the factory floor. It becomes a guiding framework for tackling any constraint.
Okay. Refresh my memory on those steps. It's been a while since I read that part of the book.
Absolutely. The first step is to identify the constraint, finding that weakest link, that Herbie, that's holding everything back. Then you exploit it, making sure it's running at peak performance, removing any obstacles. The third step is to subordinate everything else to the needs of the constraint, aligning the whole system around that one critical point.
Right, I remember those. But what were the last 2 steps again?
The fourth step is to elevate the constraint. This might involve investing in it, finding ways to increase its capacity, or removing its limitations altogether. And finally, the fifth step, and perhaps the most crucial one, is to repeat the process.
Ah, so it's a continuous loop.
Yes.
You identify, exploit, subordinate, elevate, and then start all over again with the next constraint. That makes total sense.
It does, doesn't it? Because, as we said, constraints are constantly shifting, new challenges emerge, and the journey of improvement never really ends.
Okay, I'm starting to see how powerful this framework is, but let's bring it back to Alex's story for a second. How did he apply these steps to those new challenges he was facing?
Well, one example that really highlights the ongoing nature of this process is what happened with the quality control step they put in place. Remember how we talked about Alex putting quality control before the bottleneck
Yeah.
to make sure they weren't wasting time on faulty parts?
Yeah, that seemed like a smart move.
It was. But what they discovered was that by focusing so much on quality at that specific point, they actually created a mini bottleneck further down the line.
Oh.
It's a classic case of how even the best intentioned solutions can have unintended consequences.
Wow, that's like playing whack-a-mole.
Right.
You solve one problem and another one pops up somewhere else.
Exactly, and it underscores the importance of that fifth step repeat. You have to keep monitoring the system, looking for new bottlenecks, and adjusting your approach accordingly.
So it's not just about finding that one magic bullet, it's about cultivating a mindset of continuous improvement, always being on the lookout for ways to optimize the system.
Precisely, and I think this is something that really resonates with everyone, no matter what field you're in or what goals you're trying to achieve. We've all experienced that feeling of hitting a plateau or getting stuck in a rut, but the goal offers this really empowering framework for breaking through those barriers and constantly pushing ourselves further.
Absolutely. But, it occurs to me that even when we're diligently applying these steps, sometimes the biggest roadblocks aren't just those physical bottlenecks in the factory or even our own personal bad habits. Sometimes they're about the mindset of the whole organization, right?
Oh, you're so right.
Like in the book, Alex faces this massive challenge when he realizes the entire company's way of measuring performance is actually working against him, even though his plant is now running super efficiently.
You're hitting on a really critical point here, and it's where I think the goal takes us beyond the shop floor and into the boardroom.
Yeah.
Alex realizes that even with all the improvements he's made, he's still at risk of being shut down because of how the company measures success. They're using these traditional accounting methods that focus on cutting costs in each individual department, which doesn't reflect the big picture of how much value the plant is actually creating. It's almost like the system is fighting against itself.
Yeah, it's like being penalized for doing a good job. So frustrating. How did Alex handle that? Did he just throw his hands up in defeat?
Not at all. He realized he had to tackle this constraint on a completely different level. It wasn't about tweaking machines or rearranging schedules anymore. It was about challenging the very metrics that were being used to judge his success. And that required a whole new level of persuasion, leadership, and strategic thinking.
Yeah. So he basically had to become a revolutionary, going up against this deeply ingrained system and convincing everyone to see things from a new perspective. I bet that wasn't easy.
It definitely wasn't. He had to make a really compelling case for a different way of measuring performance, a way that aligned with the true goal of the organization. And that's where I think the book really shines a light on the importance of systems thinking.
Yeah, it's not just about fixing individual parts. It's about understanding how the whole system works together and making sure everyone's rowing in the same direction.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly challenging, especially when you're going up against those deeply ingrained assumptions and those "we've always done it this way" mentalities.
Totally. It's like trying to convince your family to switch from cable to streaming. There's always going to be some resistance.
Right.
But I think that's what makes the goal so inspiring. It shows that even when you're facing those seemingly insurmountable obstacles, if you understand the system and you're persistent enough, you can actually create real lasting change.
And that change doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. It's messy, and it requires constant learning and adaptation. But when you start seeing those positive results, it's incredibly rewarding.
I can only imagine. Okay, we've covered so much ground here, from identifying bottlenecks to embracing ongoing improvement to even challenging those systemic constraints. And I'm really starting to see how these principles can be applied to, well, everything. But before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. What are your biggest takeaways from this part of the book? What's really sticking with you?
Well, one of the things that, it's amazing how the goal takes us on this journey from the factory floor to the boardroom and ultimately to this deeper understanding of how systems work and how we can work within them to make real lasting improvements. But I'm curious what happens after Alex successfully challenges those outdated metrics. Does everything just magically fall into place?
Well, if only were that simple.
Right.
Life and business are rarely about those fairy tale endings.
Yeah. But what's fascinating is that as Alex and his team navigate these new challenges, they realize they've already got the tools they need to succeed. Those 5 focusing steps we talked about earlier.
Wait, so those same steps they use to fix bottlenecks in the factory,
Yeah.
they can apply those to these bigger, more complex problems within the entire company.
Exactly. It's like they've come full circle, but on a whole new level.
Wow.
They discover that these steps identify, exploit, subordinate, elevate, and repeat aren't just about managing physical constraints on a production line.
Right.
They're a universal framework for tackling any problem in any system.
That's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. So how does that play out in the book? How do they apply these steps to these higher-level challenges?
Well, let's break it down for you. The first step, identifying the constraint, becomes about pinpointing those systemic bottlenecks.
Okay.
Maybe it's a policy that's hindering innovation, or a communication breakdown between departments, or even a deeply ingrained belief that's limiting the company's growth.
So it's about looking beyond those surface-level issues and really digging deep to find the root cause of the problem.
Exactly. And once they've identified that constraint, they move on to exploiting it, finding ways to maximize its effectiveness, remove any obstacles, and get the most out of it.
Then comes subordination, right?
Yeah.
Which in this context might mean restructuring teams, reallocating resources, or even revising entire strategies to support the needs of that critical point in the system.
Precisely. It's about aligning the entire organization around the goal and making sure everything is working in harmony to achieve it.
And then there's elevation investing in that constraint, finding ways to boost its capacity or overcome its limitations. That could involve anything from professional development for employees to adopting new technologies to completely overhauling outdated systems.
Absolutely. And of course, that crucial fifth step, repeat, because as we've seen throughout the goal, constraints are constantly shifting. New challenges emerge, and the journey of improvement is never truly over. It's about cultivating a culture of continuous improvement where everyone is empowered to identify and break through those bottlenecks no matter where they appear.
This is making me rethink my entire approach to problem solving.
I know, right?
It's not just about putting out fires or fixing individual issues. It's about understanding the system as a whole and making sure it's working as efficiently and effectively as possible.
Exactly. And the goal goes even deeper than that. It introduces these really powerful thinking processes that can help you become a more strategic and effective problem solver.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, one of the key thinking processes is called the evaporating cloud. It's a really cool tool for resolving conflicts and finding win-win solutions.
Oh, okay.
It's based on the idea that most conflicts arise from opposing assumptions. And if you can uncover those underlying assumptions and challenge them, you can often find a way to satisfy both sides.
So instead of just arguing over different solutions, you're digging deeper to find common ground and create a solution that works for everyone.
Exactly. And another really powerful thinking process is called the current reality tree.
Okay.
It's a way of mapping out cause and effect relationships
Okay.
to identify the root cause of a problem.
So instead of just treating the symptoms, you're going all the way back to the source and figuring out what's really causing the issue in the first place.
Precisely. And what's so cool about these thinking processes is that they're not just for business. You can apply them to any area of your life, relationships, personal goals, even just everyday decision-making. They help you develop this more systematic and logical approach to problem solving.
Okay. I'm starting to see how the goal goes way beyond just being a business book.
Yeah.
It's really about becoming a better thinker, a more effective problem solver, and ultimately a more successful person.
I agree.
But here's a question for you and for anyone listening. What if the biggest constraint isn't in the factory, the office, or even our own habits? What if the biggest constraint is our own thinking, our limiting beliefs, our fear of failure, our resistance to change?
That's a really powerful insight, and I think it takes us to the heart of what the goal is really about.
Yeah.
It's about challenging our own assumptions,
Yeah.
expanding our mental models, and constantly pushing ourselves to learn and grow.
So it's not just about fixing the systems around us. It's about optimizing the most important system of all, our own minds.
Exactly, because in a world that's constantly changing, the ability to think clearly, critically, and creatively is the ultimate competitive advantage.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the goal, I want to leave you with this. Don't just read this book, experience it. Let it challenge your thinking, spark your curiosity, and inspire you to become a more effective problem solver in every area of your life. And here's a little secret. The Goal is one of those books that rewards rereading now that you understand the core concepts. I guarantee you'll discover even more insights as you revisit the story. So happy reading and happy improving.